Ever imagined a world where biting into a crisp apple or, enjoying a hearty meal with soybeans suddenly becomes a luxury?
Oh, yeah.
It's a disturbing thought, right?
Definitely disturbing.
That's the reality that farmers and consumers might be facing as tariffs threaten to kind of throw the global trade system into disarray.
Yeah, they can.
These taxes on imported goods, which are designed to encourage domestic production, can set off a chain reaction across economies. And we're witnessing those tremors right now.
It really is fascinating how something like tariffs, often presented as this simple solution, can actually trigger a whole cascade of unintended consequences. To really grasp the potential impact, I think we have to go beyond just the surface level stuff.
Exactly.
And really delve into the historical context.
We've seen this before. Back in 2018, similar measures were imposed, and the consequences were really far-reaching. Now there's whispers of even harsher tariffs on the horizon, and the alarm bells are ringing louder than ever. Particularly in the agricultural sector. But before we go any further, if you are finding this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button and join our community of curious minds.
Yeah, the more informed we are, the better equipped we are to navigate these complex issues, for sure.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what happened back in 2018. The impact on farmers, particularly those who rely on exports, was pretty devastating.
Yeah, it was a stark lesson in the interconnectedness of global trade. The 2018 tariffs, they provide this crucial case study for what could happen if we go down a similar path again. But potentially even on a grander scale. Remember the apple farmers in Washington State? Their story really encapsulates the challenges that they face.
It's a poignant example of how trade wars can have very real consequences. Imagine entire orchards overflowing with unsold apples because retaliatory tariffs from countries like China and India shut down their key export markets. It's a vivid illustration of how quickly things can unravel. I want to ask our listeners something. Think back to that time. Did any of you notice any price hikes or shortages in fruits or other agricultural products at your local supermarket?
It's a good point. Those retaliatory tariffs, they really exemplify that kind of global tit-for-tat that can erupt when you have one nation imposing tariffs and then another one retaliates and suddenly everyone is caught in a trade war that ultimately harms everyone involved.
Supply chains get disrupted. Prices soar for consumers. Producers are left grappling with these surplus products that they can't sell. It's a lose-lose situation.
It is, and the impact wasn't just limited to apple orchards. Soybean and corn farmers found themselves caught in the crossfires as well.
Absolutely. Take J.C. Reimer, for example. He's a Republican farmer from Illinois, and he's been very vocal about how soybean and corn farmers have been struggling since 2018. China, once a major buyer of U.S. soybeans, shifted its purchases to Brazil. In response to those tariffs. This left American farmers with a surplus of crops and a destabilized market. So it's like a domino effect. One action triggers another. And before you know it, the entire global trade system is teetering on the brink of chaos.
Precisely. And these ramifications extend beyond just pure economics as well. We've seen how strained relationships and aggressive foreign policy can push countries towards new alliances. So when the U.S. exerted pressure on nations like Panama and Honduras, they naturally turned towards China for support.
Hold on. Are you saying that political tensions can directly influence trade relationships?
Absolutely.
That adds a whole new layer of complexity to this situation.
It's a critical connection that often gets overlooked. When a country feels threatened or unsupported, they instinctively seek out new partnerships. China has been strategically leveraging this dynamic, and they've been actively building their global influence through these economic partnerships. And that's really evident in their ambitious Silk Road Initiative.
The Silk Road Initiative. Now, that's where things get really interesting. Before we dive into that, though, if you're finding this discussion insightful, don't forget to give this episode a like. It helps us reach a wider audience and keeps these important conversations going.
Indeed, the Silk Road Initiative isn't just about building roads and bridges. It's about reshaping global trade routes and forging new economic alliances. It involves this vast network of infrastructure projects spanning continents, from high-speed railways to deep seaports, all financed through this complex web of loans and investments. China's strategic goals behind this initiative, they're multifaceted. They're aiming to secure access to resources, expand their economic influence, and ultimately challenge the existing global order.
So it's not just about economics. It's about geopolitics and power dynamics on a global scale.
Exactly. And the potential implications for participating countries are vast and varied.
Okay.
While some may benefit from improved infrastructure and increased trade, others might face challenges, such as debt burdens, environmental concerns, and even political dependence on China.
So it's not a simple black and white situation.
Right.
There are potential benefits and drawbacks to consider, and the long-term consequences are still unfolding.
Precisely. And this complexity is really what makes understanding these global shifts so crucial.
It all circles back to that initial question. What happens when something as basic as an apple or a bag of soybeans becomes a luxury? Because of trade wars and these shifting global alliances.
Right.
It's a question that we need to grapple with, and that's exactly what we're doing here on this episode.
Absolutely. And these shifting alliances are sending ripples across the global landscape. Remember the G20 summit a few months ago?
Yeah.
The meeting between the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and Xi Jinping. It sent a pretty clear signal that Mexico might be exploring closer ties with China.
So it's not just individual countries reassessing their positions.
Right.
Entire regions are reevaluating their allegiances in this intricate geopolitical dance.
Exactly. And these shifts have very real economic repercussions. There's a palpable sense of unease in the air about a potential trade war brewing between the U.S., Mexico, Canada, and China.
A trade war involving those economic powerhouses.
Yeah.
That sounds ominous. What makes those countries so pivotal in this scenario?
Well, they're major importers of U.S. agricultural products, particularly corn and soybeans.
Right.
If trade relations deteriorate, American farmers could lose access to these vital markets.
We're talking about a substantial portion of their business here.
Yeah.
What kind of impact are we looking at if those trade flows are disrupted?
The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates that 16% of the U.S. corn harvest and a staggering 40% of soybeans are exported. Imagine the economic fallout if those exports are suddenly curtailed.
Okay, so we have potential trade wars looming, alliances shifting, and farmers facing a pretty precarious future.
Yeah.
What's the overarching message we should take away from all of this?
The key takeaway, I think, is that tariffs, while seemingly straightforward, can set off a chain reaction of unintended consequences. They can harm farmers, disrupt global trade, and even reshape international relations in some pretty profound ways.
It's a stark reminder that we live in an interconnected world, and actions taken in one corner of the globe can really reverberate across continents. We can't simply isolate ourselves economically without inflicting some serious damage both on ourselves and the global community. But there's another layer to this story. There's a narrative circulating that tries to pin the blame for a potential economic downturn on President Biden.
Oh, really?
I've seen this mainly in some right-wing media outlets. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a narrative that warrants a closer examination, I think.
Yeah.
While there are legitimate economic concerns, it's crucial to look at the bigger picture and avoid oversimplifications. It's tempting to point fingers and assign blame, but the reality is far more nuanced.
Right.
The global economy is a complex ecosystem, and attributing a potential downturn solely to one person or policy is misleading.
I've heard that narrative too, and it often feels like an attempt to rewrite history and disregard the economic realities of recent years.
Exactly. It's vital to consider the facts and avoid getting swept up in these simplistic narratives.
Right.
We need to engage in critical thinking and scrutinize the information that we're being fed, especially when it comes to complex issues, like international trade and economics, for instance. Under the Biden administration, we've seen record job growth, the stock market reaching new highs, consistent GDP growth, record low unemployment, increased wages, and strong support for unions. These are substantial achievements that can't be overlooked.
It's about looking at the evidence objectively and challenging those simplistic narratives.
Right.
Even if it means engaging in some uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
So if you're finding this analysis helpful and you appreciate this nuanced approach, don't forget to give this episode it helps us get the word out and encourages more people to think critically about these crucial issues. Now, let's address those who are still buying into that narrative.
Right.
Blaming President Biden for all of this. How do we approach that?
I think it's essential to engage with their arguments, not with hostility, but with a willingness to understand their perspective. Let's point out any factual inaccuracies and present a more balanced viewpoint.
It's about fostering those challenging dialogues and dismantling simplistic narratives even when it's uncomfortable.
Right.
But how do we do that effectively?
By encouraging a culture of critical thinking.
Right.
Where we question assumptions, weigh evidence, and consider a multitude of perspectives.
Right.
It's not about silencing opposing views, but it's about fostering thoughtful debate grounded in facts and logic. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping a more informed and nuanced public discourse.
That's a powerful message. We need more of that in today's world.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that even amidst disagreements, we can find common ground and work towards solutions that benefit everyone.
So as we wrap up this part of our discussion, what's one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to ponder as they go about their day? Something that'll keep this conversation alive in their minds.
Here's a thought-provoking question. In an increasingly interconnected world, is it even feasible to achieve genuine economic isolation without inflicting substantial harm, not just on ourselves, but on the global community as a whole?
Right.
It's a question that challenges us to confront the complexities of our interconnected world and to consider the ripple effects of our actions.
It really is a powerful question to think about. It challenges us to kind of look beyond, our own immediate interests. And consider, the broader implications of our choices. We can't just, bury our heads in the sand and pretend these global challenges don't exist.
Right.
We have to be engaged, informed, and willing to participate in finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly. And I think that begins with acknowledging the, complexities, the interconnectedness, and the potential consequences of actions like imposing these tariffs. It's about understanding we are all a part of this delicate web of interdependence.
Right.
And our actions can have really far-reaching effects.
So to bring it all back to that image of apples and soybeans potentially becoming luxury items, what's the core message you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
The message is simple, but profound. Our choices have consequences as consumers, as citizens, as global citizens.
Right.
We all have a responsibility to be aware, to be engaged, and to advocate for policies that promote, cooperation and understanding rather than isolationism and conflict.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
The challenges we face, whether it's climate change, economic instability, or these global trade wars, they demand collective solutions. It's about seeing the bigger picture. Acknowledging that our actions, have these ripple effects. And working towards a more just and equitable world for everyone.
And if you found this conversation insightful and thought-provoking, consider subscribing to stay updated on future episodes. And don't forget to share this episode with your friends, family, colleagues. The more people we can engage in this kind of critical thinking, the better equipped we'll be to navigate these complexities of our world.
Absolutely. Let's keep the conversation going, keep learning, and keep striving for a better future together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the intricate world of global trade and tariffs. Until next time, stay curious and keep those questions coming.